Welcome to another video tutorial. Today I'm going to talk about clone stamping again. This time I want to show you some special tricks with it though. Clone stamping is literally cloning some pixels. So for example, I have these tourists here that I want to cover up. So I'm going to clone or take some of the pixels here and copy them here to hide them. There's some tricks to doing this, however. For example, in this image you can see how there's this rock here and there's just some objects that we need to be really careful to move around. So there's a couple things you can do to make that easier. The first thing I'm going to do is go to New, Layer, via Copy right there. So I usually just hit Command or Control J to do that as a shortcut, but you can see it here. The reason that I make a new layer via Copy is anytime I'm editing on the image, if you make a mistake, it's easier to just delete this layer and then you can start over again from the background. Just a little tip. The next thing I'm going to do is make a new blank layer. You can hover over this little icon to create a new layer, so you can see that here. What I'm going to do is use this blank layer to put my clone stamping in. The first thing I want to do though is take my selection tool and select around the edges of this. So for example, I can just draw with my mouse, and I probably should have gotten my Wacom tablet out. It's like a little mouse that you control with a pencil, but oh well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I have that selected. And now I can go ahead and clone stamp without worrying about hitting this lady here. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my clone stamp tool. And then first of all, that's way too big. So I'm going to drop down the size of my brush, make it a little smaller maybe. By the way, notice my brush has a nice soft edge. That will allow this clone stamping to blend in. When you are in Photoshop, when you have an area selected, Photoshop will only let you do things to the area selected. So right now, for example, if I want to clone stamp, and I'm going to go to this open layer, when you're in Photoshop, if you have an area selected, Photoshop will only let you do something to that selection area. So right now, for example, if I try to clone these pixels, I can't accidentally clone over this woman here because she's not selected. Right here I can say sample and I'm going to say current and below. So this way I can be on this layer here and hit Alt Option click, or Alt Option, I might choose these pixels, Alt Option click, and now it's allowing me to select the pixels on that layer underneath. You can see how I can't accidentally cover up this woman here because she's not selected. Now I'm hitting this funny spot here, so I'm going to reselect just because I want that texture to cover there. You do have to pay a little bit of attention to what pixels you place where, which I talk a lot about in my other clone stamping video. So for example, I want to make sure this hill looks like it's following down, like so. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control or Command D for deselect, and now you can see how that area is deselected. I missed a little bit right here. I probably could have done better with that. Maybe I'll go ahead and reselect this area again. Once again, I probably should have gotten my Wacom tablet out, but I am decently good at using my mouse for this, and you probably don't have a Wacom tablet. I'm going to go ahead, just select this little area. Once again, I can go back to my clone stamp, hit Alt Option click, and I can color like this. I say color, recopy those pixels. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and deselect again, and you can see how I've effectively removed that tourist. Now I'm going to go over to this dude here, like so. By the way, I'm just going to show you really quick, because this is in its own layer, it's kind of nice just to isolate that. That can be helpful sometimes if you need to make any edits just to the clone stamping part. All right, I'm going to zoom back in, and now I'm going to be selecting with this guy. So I'm going to once again take my little lasso tool. You could use the quick selection tool technically, but I just don't think it will work well in this instance. I think it'll be hard to pick up that edge. So that's why I'm using the lasso tool in this situation. There are a bunch of different ways to select things. Once again, it's just in this instance, I think this is easier. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to hit Shift because I really want to pull down a little extra. Do you see how I can just hit Shift and hold this and it adds that area to it? So you may not have known that you could do that with a lasso tool. because you can see how I missed that little section of his head. I'm gonna pick a little bit more up here too, so I have some more area to select from. I'm gonna go back to my blank layer. I'm gonna once again take my clone stamp. I'm gonna do that Alt Option again to select the pixels I want to use. So Alt Option click. I want these pixels to continue down here just because that will follow the contour of this mountain. Keep going like so. I'm going to reselect. If you keep shifting your selection, it just helps things blend. If you clone stamp too much of one area, you can tell that you just copied from one area to another. So you really want to kind of keep reselecting just to make it blend a little more naturally. Okay, and then I'm going to take this hill here, copy down there. Once again, it's nice we can't accidentally go over that rock. That is the key thing here, and that's what's going to help make your clone stamping look better. Sometimes you're clone stamping and it doesn't matter, you don't need an edge. You might have like a football in a grassy field, so then you don't have to worry about any kind of obstruction. But in an example like this, you do have to be careful because there's a rock here and you don't want that rock to have bits of hill covering it because that will look strange. Okay, so now you can see how I covered that correctly. If I hide this layer here, you can see how the tourists disappear or don't disappear, like so. And you know what? I'm noticing there's a little bit of extra pixels I copied up here that I didn't mean to do. There we go. Okay. If you want, you give this layer a name, covering tourists, for example. And then here you have your image. What I like to do is I like to go ahead and save this. I can call this Peru Edit. Save it on my desktop. I have, oops, sorry, this is off the screen a little bit. If you look, you can see Photoshop PDF is selected. That's just because the last document I did was a PDF file. I can go ahead and hit JPEG and select that. I'm gonna go ahead and hit save. I always make sure that it's on maximum and go ahead and hit OK. What I can do now is save this file as a Photoshop file as well. I can call it the Peru Edit and then save it as a Photoshop file. The reason I'm saving it both as a Photoshop file and a JPEG, let's say you go and print this and you realize you missed like a little tiny bit of the person over here. With these layers isolated, it's a lot easier just to tweak that, fix that edit slightly. The reason you need the JPEG version is because if you are going to go to print that, then you need that JPEG version in order to be able to send it to a printer. Most printers can't take that Photoshop file. Once you have this set, you can play with the brightness and contrast and do some adjustments with the image itself. It would be more ideal if this was in the raw format and you can stay within a raw image and clone stamp in full Photoshop. Then this would allow you to do a little bit more image editing to it. And I actually tend to do my image adjustments in Lightroom versus Photoshop. Now you can see once again how I clone stamped and removed those people without having to worry about accidentally covering up the rock or this woman here. Hopefully this was helpful. If you like my video, make sure you hit the little like button so other people can find it.